Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Dr. Alexis Fink, who is a leading figure in people analytics. Dr. Fink has led people analytics teams at several major tech companies, as well as done extensive work in organizational transformation, organizational culture, leadership assessment, and the application of advanced analytical methods to human capital problems. She's just capped off her year as the SIOP president, the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology, and it just so happens to be corresponding with her graduation from her role as VP of People Analytics and Workforce Strategy at Meta. She is a scientist and a teacher at heart, who may be graduating from corporate leadership, but not from wrestling with fascinating, important questions. Alexis, thank you for being with us today.
So much for that beautiful introduction. I am honored and delighted and really looking forward to this conversation with my old friend, Dr. Rob McKenna.
We're really excited too. And I didn't prep you for this, but we're going to play a quick round of wild cards. I don't know if you're familiar with this. We have a deck of cards that is in total 50, but I've just pulled 10. Each has a different question that's developmentally focused. It's a fun way to kind of go deep quick. And also you can share in one sentence your answer. It doesn't have to be deep. Okay. I'll go first, and then Dr. Fink, you can go next, and Rob will round us out. So we'll just pick a number between 1 and 10. Today I'm going to go with 2. What is the purpose behind every meeting on your calendar today? I would say this is to see and be seen. Every person I get to meet with today is an opportunity to see and know them, and also have a moment to be seen at the same time. So that is.
Isn't that lovely? I just actually was looking at my calendar right before we popped in here, and I would say to elevate and serve those around me as I move into this season of graduation. All of my meetings, hopefully including this one, are really about elevating and serving those around me.
I love that.
Can I answer the same question? I'll answer the same question. I was in a meeting right before this, and on a board that I'm on. They asked me to reflect at the beginning, and I'm going between meetings really quickly today, like I think probably all of us are. And I wish I had settled when they asked me to reflect at the beginning. And so I think to be present in the moment, even though everything's back to back. Thank you, Sab. That is great stuff. Alexis, this is such a fun thing. So I would be remiss, because I know you're just coming off of PSYOP, and I have to start there because so many of our listeners who have no idea what PSYOP is, and so I'm going to give my quick description and then you do a better job. But this was my one over the years. It's the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychology is one of the most powerful guilds in the corporate world that you've never heard of. People within our field are responsible for the bread and butter is like selection and performance management is where we start, and then it just grows from there to leadership development and everything you can imagine about behavior in the workplace. And Alexis is coming off a year as president of SIOP. It's a powerful, extensive guild, and you were just at the conference. Can you just describe this moment of that part of your transition? I'm just curious because I saw a post you put out there and I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what you're experiencing right now in that.
So I'm honestly still kind of on my PSYOP high. I describe IO psychology and PSYOP as the science of work and workers, and we are really unusual in that we hold both of those as priorities. If you think of a lot of your social psychologists, et cetera, they're really focused on the human experience. We are too. If you think about a lot of people coming out of business school, they're really focused on the business experience and efficiency. And one of the things that I think really makes PSYOP and IO psychologists unique is our ability to pursue those mutual goals and really try and find those opportunities that serve both of those key audiences or intentions. And it's part of what's helped me feel good about this work for over 30 years. I can help organizations deliver great results while also helping the individuals who comprise those organizations to lead thriving, robust, exciting lives.
Yeah, that is.
The conference itself was fantastic. We had about 4,500 people this year. We were at the Denver Convention Center, which gave us the opportunity to have 25 parallel presentations at every hour, plus
Wow.
a full vendor hall full of posters. So the amount of content was amazing. The focus on AI and future of work was incredible. And we still retained a lot of content on leadership, a lot of content on things like selection, performance management. Even in this challenging time, we had a fair amount of content on diversity and organization development, human thriving, occupational health, just an absolute playground of
Mm,
innovation, of
mm.
discovery, and of real science. So, real answers about the full spectrum of topics for work and working.
Yeah. So I don't get to talk to, my brothers and sisters and friends who have also been shaped by the foundation of that guild. So I think I always talk about how most of us were shaped and affected by some community of people. And sometimes it's like we get so embedded that we need to stretch outside of that, but we also like it's so formative and so important to us. It's like family. I'm curious when it comes to industrial organizational psychology, and especially as you were in that year of leadership. And I know that it's more than a year because you like transition in for a year, you're in for a year, and
Yeah.
what did you see that you didn't see before, or maybe were given a new perspective on it being the president of that association?
Oh, wow. What a great question. I think some of it was about the inflection point that we're sitting in now, like so many organizations, where we're really needing to rethink the way we operate based on a whole set of external factors, as well as some internal factors that mean that our value proposition to members and to the world at large probably needs to shift a little bit. The pandemic really taught us that we needed to be more thoughtful about ensuring our stability. For a lot of
Mm,
people, PSYOP is just the conference. We have a lot of opportunities to offer more than that. We haven't been taking advantage of those opportunities. We also see with the advent of people analytics, which, of course, you and I, as IOs, have been doing for a long time, but the rest of the world sort of discovered that with the 2010 Tom Davenport HBR article, Competing on People Analytics. So
yeah.
now there are tons and tons of people who have come to this work without the same grounding we have of work and workers, without the same grounding we have of statistical principles about validation and making sure that you have good evidence. And the folks are doing this work. So, how do we pull them in? How do we support organizations? How do we do all of this in a way that serves our mission, serves our intention, and also preserves those things that make us really special? So that has been, I think, probably analogous to what a lot of other leaders are facing. The presidential role contained more of that than I expected. Historically, it was a little bit ceremonial, a little bit, here's the new award I'm going to kick off. And this time, there was a
Mm.
lot of strategy and a lot of operations.
Just so that people can get to know you a little bit, you're in the middle of an important transition moment. And knowing you for all these years, I know this is an important moment. And so I'm curious about just describe what it is you are transitioning from, and to the extent you are clear to what.
Well, you're catching me in the second week of the two, so I'm gonna
Okay.
ask for some grace in figuring out
Mm,
exactly what two looks like, because we all know best laid plans don't always pan out. What I'm transitioning from is the last 6 years and some change. I have been vice president for people analytics and workforce strategy, one of the largest, most influential companies on the planet. Meta, with its family of products from Facebook, Instagram, the virtual reality products, Oculus, WhatsApp, which is the world's #1 messaging service. So I have been running all of the science, all of the people science, as well as a fair amount of the data work and data governance to the point you just described for the last 6.5 years. I made a really intentional decision from a leadership perspective. Even during the interview, I said, my goal is to stay in this role for 5-ish years and then build a successor
mm,
and have you not need the same level of sort of expertise that I'm bringing. My goal is to be replaced by a director instead of a vice
mm.
president. My goal
Interesting.
is to build enough infrastructure, enough practice, enough enough depth, enough inevitability that will go from a building phase to a sustaining phase. And so one of the first things I'm going to do is start working on succession, start working on building the leaders up behind me so that when I step away, things will continue. And it's been really gratifying. I was at, as you mentioned, SIOP last week. A bunch of my alumni, of course, were there. It's gratifying to have them catch me in the hall and say, oh, you know, this thing we were working on last week, we had this great win with it. You know, this thing you really cared about and built over years. Hey, here's the new trajectory and investment that we're getting in it. We're sustaining it and keeping it forward. So I feel like maybe even more than the technical work I did, I was really proud of the fact that I was able to grow a successor, successfully launch that successor, get out of his way. Like, you should only have to sit in the number 2 seat for so long. This poor guy had been a number 2 to me for 6 years and before that as well. So really give him his opportunity to shine and make sure he was prepared to do that. Make sure we'd prepared the leadership team to absorb him in a way that would be healthy. So that's the from.
Yeah.
The to, I'm very fortunate in that my youngest is graduating from college. So I have the freedom that comes with that. And I kind of want to be almost you when I grow up, Rob. I'm trying to move, aspiring.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Aspiring to move into more of the consulting, advising, coaching season of my life. Yeah. It turns out that I'm a really good large organization manager and administrator. I don't love that work. I really love the science. I really love working directly with leaders. I really love discovery. I really love coaching people through challenge. So I'm interested in spending more of my time doing those things and less of my time creating the conditions that let other people do those things. I'm looking forward to a life that has a variety of interesting projects. I've got a couple of startups that we're kind of flirting about some advising relationships. I've got a relationship with I4CP to run their people analytics board. For a very long time, I've had a relationship with USC Center for Effective Organizations. So continuing to do some teaching and facilitating and coaching for them. I'm engaging with another long-term IO colleague on some learning things under an Unleash Mastery header. We'll be doing a coaching certification class in May, and that, you know, sort of fills my bucket. So trying to put together a bit of a portfolio life for this next season.
Okay, so you're prompting some questions from me that I cannot help but ask. So
okay,
a little while back, I did a podcast where I described the history of leadership research as a house party where, you'll have to hear this if you get a chance, and we'll put it in the show notes, but it was basically a way to describe 100 years of stories, right? Of things, of great people who thought and made progress in thinking about what leader development, what leadership looks like. And so I create this scenario of a house party. Everybody's showing up, and then there was a group from Ohio State and University of Michigan talking in the corner, and it was like everybody's showing up. From Fred Fiedler was there, Hersey and Blanchard popped into this conversation at some point. I mean, it's going back to all kinds of people were showing up at the party, and then Peter Drucker shows up at the very end. But one of the things that I was trying to sort of help people understand, because it's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
Is that if you look at the fundamentals of kind of what was behind all of it, the common findings, is that leaders, all that research and theory really comes down to two things. It's the people and the processes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like at the center of it, even that concept of consideration versus task, and all it was like there's an operational reality related to leadership and there's a people reality. It's probably why when I ask CEOs what they would go back and study if they could go back to school, most of them will say like finance, accounting, or operations, like on one side, and then they'll say and psychology on the other, because that's my life.
100%. Yep.
And so I'm kind of curious, because you and I both were trained, like our foundational training was in deep science, quite honestly, but also with an interest in people. I'm so curious, like, where are you in terms of like, I hear both of those things in you just now, even when you were talking about your successor.
Yeah.
How do you How do you think about that combination of this, what's going on in the heart and soul of a human being, and operations and science and that other piece of the puzzle?
Oh, man, what a great question. I remember that years ago, and I won't name the company, we built a leadership model that said basically you had to have people to be able to lead people, so people leadership, which is sort of relating, and that tended to be a little bit more in your immediate sphere, like one or two layers out. You had to have organizational leadership, so you had to be able to create large scale conditions where the information that needed to flow could flow, the things could be aligned. Then you had to have self leadership, right? You had to have emotional regulation. You had to be able to make good choices about where you were spending your time. You had to get not derailed when emergencies happen. You had to keep a clear head. You had to do sort of all of these things. And then you had sort of the technical leadership part where you had to have some foundation to stand on, right? And I thought that that was an interesting blend because three of those are really about people, right? There's one that's about the business at hand. There's three about making people in a group function holistically and effectively. And I think that, yes, my graduate study, there were 3 doctoral programs and they made us all take the same first 2 years. So there was a PsyD program, there was an experimental thing, and then there was the IO. So I actually took maybe a more than usual amount of foundational psychology through my graduate preparation. But I also lived in Asia as a kid. I lived in a totally different context, which is also a fantastic crucible for understanding humans. When you are a severe minority, we were Caucasians were 0.4% of the population. You learn real quick how to attend to a different set of rules. And then that helps you think differently about the fungibility of rules and different ways you can approach a problem. And I've had a variety of other kinds of experiences that really, I think, helped me think about the human pieces a little bit differently. And then, as you know, like I am a technologist at heart, right? I started writing code when I was 7 years old. I love this stuff. I spent 5 years post-graduate school doing large-scale organizational change, including several acquisition integrations. I had to literally go through a finance for non-financial managers class. I did a ton of finance and operations work. So I think all those things do come together, and the basic dichotomy you highlight is a critical one.
So often when I'm working with certain kinds of organizations, especially in the nonprofit sector, where the operational realities are not really a part of the conversation as comfortably.
Yeah.
And then oftentimes in business contexts where we function, the human piece is a little bit less comfortable. You know what I mean? Like it's like we're really ready to talk about. And I think the people that know you see you as an extremely competent technical person who has this incredible spirit also.
Oh, thank you.
And I think and I know that's true because I know we have lots of common friends. And I'm curious about the brilliant humanity in you and also this competence operationally that I would want people to hear. What is it that you see at the core of human functioning in organizations right now that's really important for people to pay attention to?
Oh, you weren't kidding about that. We're going to go deep. I think there is a ton of fear and anxiety in organizations at the moment. There's been so much change. There's so much change in the world. And I was actually having a conversation with somebody last night that it's a little bit like when Linus from Peanuts, when his blanket is in the washer and dryer, it's like, oh, what do we hang on to? What do we know that we can trust? And it kind of goes to the paper you guys just wrote about trust in organizations. There are things that we felt confident in for a very long time that feel less sure right now. People feel less sure about their path to promotion, which is important to them. They feel less sure about the stability and security of their job, which is important to them. They feel less sure about the working conditions. Will they be able to work in the location they're in right now? They feel less sure about what the financial realities of their company will be. And they feel less sure about the opportunities they're going to have for professional development as all these other things kind of collapse on them. And they probably feel less sure that the people around them are always telling the truth.
Yeah.
So I'm really sad, I think, at the level of wobbliness that the world is experiencing. And we see this in our college students with the sort of record amount of mental health consultations that we're seeing. There's a lot of pain that I think a lot of people are trying really hard to hide so that they can function, so that they can still be respected, so that they can maybe bend the world to make themselves at less risk. And it's hard to do that kind of masking over a long period of time.
I have two lines of questioning, and I'm trying to decide whether to bounce around or stay on this. I'm gonna choose to stay on it, but
Yeah.
I'm curious from your experience, what does trust have to do with the performance and well-being of people in the organizations we lead right now?
Oh, man, what a great question. There's all kinds of good evidence that when trust is absent, people are less likely to take risks, right? They're less likely to take a big swing and more likely to play it safe. Playing safe has the opportunity, has the advantage of reducing the downside, but it has the disadvantage of really putting a ceiling on the upside.
Hmm.
And so when people are anxious, when they are uncertain, they retreat, they play it safe, and the dampening effect on that is pretty big. So
Yeah.
I do really worry about that.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
I remember a meta-analysis. It's gone back, maybe it's old, maybe 2007. It was a Journal of Applied Psychology meta-analysis. For those of you who are not familiar with meta-analysis, imagine taking 100 earlier statistical studies and like throwing them into a blender, and then you get like a data smoothie out of it, and the data smoothie has certain flavors. So
It's
you
not
can
it's
take,
not a study done by Meta, by the way. It is a
that's right.
meta-analysis. Yes.
It is a statistical method,
Yes, yes,
not a study done by my former employer.
yes.
You take a couple hundred studies and have all kinds of different variables, and then you say, okay, what is truth inside of all of this body of research, which maybe sometimes there's some arguing around the end. And one of the things we found was competence. Great, you would expect competence to be important for trust. One of the things we found was integrity. So, and I'm saying we as a community of IOs, not, I didn't write the study.
Mhm.
Integrity, which is, is there coherence between your words and actions? If you say you're going to do something, do I think you're going to do it? Right? Can I have confidence that there will be alignment there? Not that you're going to be a people pleaser who says one thing to one person and a different thing to the next person who wanders through your office. There was another one, which I want to say they called beneficence, not maybe the best word, but basically the idea that this person, this entity, has my best interests at heart, that
Mhm.
they care about me. And so if I think you can do the job, if I think that you tell me you're doing the job means there's a reasonable likelihood you'll actually do the job, and then I think you care enough about me to make decisions in my best interest, to consider what might matter to me, then I feel like these conditions are right for trust. And it was sort of obviously taking a lot of more complex models, boiling them down to small things. Right now, I think there are questions in some cases about competence, right? I know that there are questions about integrity because we're seeing a lot of say do disconnects
Mhm.
in the world at large, in organizations, et cetera. Some of those are unavoidable, where this was my intention and the financial realities of my company mean that this wasn't true, and I wasn't able to back that up. But the last one, do you have my best interests at heart? I worry about a society and organizations that maybe start to feel more selfish,
Mm.
maybe start to feel more like I'm going to do what's best for me. And I worry about the consequences of that. in terms of people's ability to trust, and then people's ability to operate kind of at the top of their game, right? If you feel like you have to do everything on your own, then you lose the incredible power of a network. You lose the incredible power of the rest of your team. You lose the ability to uncover insights that you didn't have, but somebody else had, because you're not open enough, you're not vulnerable enough, you're not willing to engage enough, and they're not willing to engage with you. So there is this sort of dampening that I worry about.
The way we got to trust, you and I have not talked about this, I don't think, is that, you know, all these years I was so invested in building a whole leader development platform of assessments. That's what I just invested so much of the last 15 years doing, more than that. And and so we did that. And so I'll always be a whole leader development and whole team development person. Like, let's bring the best science we can and make it accessible to normal human beings to process that and develop their leader capacity. And as we started to do that, you know, my intention wasn't just to where a leader comes into the laboratory and we develop that leader, but we were having them process this information together. And so as a business, it got us into using our set of assessments as conversational tools within teams. Kind of connected the leader development emphasis to team development. And what was interesting, Alexis, is that a few years ago, then I was trying to understand the growth and change in our own business, and had someone come in to give us strategic help to understand, like, how do we move to this next level? And what they did is they looked at all the organizations that we had worked with and talked to the CEOs and talked to different stakeholders. And what they found was the number one thing outside of developing leader capacity that was happening because of what we were doing was trust was growing.
Yes.
And it was,
yes, those two are so connected.
Exactly. It was like, and I always say, like, if your leader development like efforts are being done well, they will be trust building efforts. And
absolutely.
But on the getting back to the measurement piece, the thing I always, and this is me just kind of admitting something, is that over the years, I've kind of been bothered by big outcome variables. So like trust has always bothered me because you don't get trust by talking about trust.
Right. It's like you don't get happiness by talking about happiness.
It's why I was the most annoying dissertation chair, because students, I would always, this was what people would say, and they would like roll their eyes. Like, if you're going to work with McKenna as your dissertation chair, he's going to say this: define the construct. I would always come back to, like, if you don't know what you're talking about, how can we measure it?
Right.
And so I'm so curious. This is my transition to this other part of your brain about why does measurement matter in our world today? And how do we do that in a way that we don't lose the spirit of human beings in the I don't know. Like, let me ask the first question. Why does measurement matter?
Yeah.
Period.
So I'll give you the maybe surprising part of my answer first. Sometimes measurement matters just because it forces a conversation, right? Yes. If you say something in a hand wavy way, saying, that's great, I want to do that, let's measure it. Well, how would we do that? Well, we operationally define it. And in operationally defining it, you get a third of the room to say, nailed it. And a third of the room to say, whoa, 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 that's not what I meant at all. And another third of the room to say, yeah, that's not what I meant, but I also didn't mean what the second third of the room thought we meant. And so it is enormously powerful as a clarifying process. So if you say, I really care about internal mobility in my company and successors. Okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that all jobs supervisor and up should be internal? Does that mean all of your hypos should be landing an internal job within 24 months of the last job that they hired? Like, what does internal mobility actually mean? And the shorthand I use, my poor team gets so sick of hearing it, is, well, why does this matter? And how will we know? Right? And so if you can answer, why does this matter and how will we know? You've done the job of measurement, right? And so I think I love measuring things. I'm a compulsive measurer of things. Probably a tape measure in this office somewhere, for Pete's sake. But I get concerned when people measure things because they are convenient and because they want to seem cool without having clarity of purpose. And then just having a measure is only the first part of the battle. You have to have some sense of how you evaluate that measure. What does good look like? Is it
Yes.
always better? Is it always like increasing? There are some things that we measure that it's actually a guardrail for some other measure, where actually what I want is for this thing to not change. So I want to shorten my interview process without losing candidate, like positive candidate reactions, right?
Mm.
I want to reduce the amount of effort I put into my hiring process, and shorten the time to hire without reducing my quality of hire and the number of people who engaged as successful at 12 months out, right? Sometimes a measure is not about change. It's about stability and engaging things. Once you get to a certain size org, and I think I saw some decent studies that says it's around 300, you can't personally know what's going on everywhere.
Yep.
So you need some kind of measurement system. But
Yeah.
boy,
Yeah.
you can do more harm than good with those things.
Yeah. The other thing it's funny, I would add to your list, I was thinking about I love what you just said. It forces a conversation. It gets it started. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. I over the years, I developed more recently, I feel like I developed a new language for the way to think about this. But I saw your post recently about qualitative and quantitative methods when you
Yeah.
were reflecting on your PSYOP
Yeah.
moment at the conference. And that's important to me because I never really had this language until the last few years. And it was that in many ways, and I've always been drawn to mixed methods ever since I was in
Mm-hmm.
graduate school. But back then we were told you can't have it both ways. Like there was this issue you had to choose. And I was always
Oh.
like, I don't understand because I was always seeing a natural connection between the science and the story. And in
Mm-hmm.
many ways, we call it at Wild, we call it contextualized measurement. So it's like
Really?
that the numbers matter, but they matter more when there's a story attached to them. You know
That's
what I
right.
mean? So it opens up this reflective moment where it's this amazing way to think about qualitative and quantitative data in very interesting ways. I think the other thing I was thinking of is that engagement in specificity, that
Yeah.
we know that specificity plays,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very difficult for human beings to get specific without measuring something,
Mm-hmm.
without some sort of a framing around those things. Um, so I'm kind of curious as we get into this conversation around. So you had a chance to like look at some of the things on trust. I just want to dig into that just for a moment.
Yeah.
Is so we say that it's a critical aspect. One of the things we describe is that trust in many ways connects those visible and invisible pieces of what's happening.
Yeah.
That entrust is sort of the bridge between our operational functioning and the invisible kind of assumptions and things that are going on behind the scenes. One of our
Mm-hmm.
big findings was that another thing that I would add to that list of things you mentioned about trust and its sort of what is its makeup, that we found that one of the big drivers was truth,
Yes. Yeah.
the ability for us to be truthful with one another. Could you speak to that for just a moment?
I think you're absolutely right. And it's one of the things that I find hardest as a leader, because there are times when you can't be fully truthful. You don't have to lie. But if you, for example, know that there's a layoff coming, there are times as a leader that you can't say anything about it, right? And
Yeah.
it chews at your soul. And so, how do you find a way to talk about the business realities and talk about risk and talk about what we're going to do to build resilience into our roadmap? And how do you genuinely do those things, build resilience in your roadmap, et cetera, without saying, hey, golly, we're going to have a riff and it's going to be XYZ numbers,
Yeah.
even though you know it's going to come. And then the way that you can, as a leader, frame what's possible, what's not possible, the way you can truthfully say, I can't talk about that, and you know better than to ask that question, and the way you can be thoughtful and consistent across a leadership role can help mitigate some of the damaging consequences of times when you can't be as fully truthful as you would like. And one example I would give is when people have left my organization. There have been times when I've had to fire people. I'm not going to tell people why. That actually, I think, works in my favor, Because when people leave voluntarily and I didn't fire them, I also won't tell anybody why. It's like, nope, people always get to tell their own stories. But there are ways you can find an approach to truth and truthfulness and integrity that I think can help even when you're kind of trapped in situations where you can't ethically tell the whole truth. The flip of that is, yeah, when you can tell the truth, my God, do it. Do what those things you can to be truthful, to have high integrity to the extent that people know that you will give them all the information that you're legally or ethically able to. It'll help you bridge the times when you can't, and they have confidence. I'm trying to avoid the word trust, but they'll have confidence that you would tell them things that you were able to tell them. So you can sort of store up some credibility to get you through those moments that as a leader are kind of awkward and difficult.
Okay, one last question to a budding industrial or organizational psychologist.
Yep.
And to a senior leader, either the CEO of a small to mid-cap business or a mid-level to senior leader in a large corporation. If you gave advice to those two people, the budding IO psychologist and that senior leader, what would you say?
Oh my gosh, like way to give it to me with no context. I would say for the budding IO, to make sure that you do what I refer to as an expat assignment outside of IO. Get some experience in something that is not your area of expertise. It'll give you new mental models. It'll give you different connections. It'll give you credibility with your business stakeholders. Get out of the bubble of just HR and IO, even if it's only for a year. That sort of expat assignment in another area of business, I think is hugely valuable. I know it's been valuable for me. It's been valuable for many of the IOs I've worked with that have been really, really successful.
That's gold.
And then to a senior leader at a small to mid-cap business, I would say be really mindful of the trap of doing everything yourself. It is tempting when you're the one who's built the business. You know it the best. You have the highest standards. The challenge is that means that if you have a heart attack and you're gone for 6 weeks, everything could fall apart. If you're the one who's holding everything together, it's a great ego trip. And if you're a person who has a high need for control, it gives you a sense of calm, but it is fundamentally a risky strategy. And it's fundamentally a recipe for burnout. It is terrifying, even as a manager of managers. It's terrifying to let go of a little bit of that control. It's terrifying to move to a world of setting clear performance expectations, setting clarity about a goal, and then letting someone else run the how that sits inside that what. But that's how you're going to extend your capacity. It's how you're going to expand the leadership bench. And it's how you're going to keep yourself out of the hospital.
Yeah. So good. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Powerful. Thank you so much, Alexis and Dr. McKenna. We want the people listening or watching to know how they can connect with you. What is the best way for them to find and connect with you after having listened to this incredible masterclass that you've just given us?
Oh, you're so lovely. The easiest thing to do is to find me on LinkedIn. There aren't that many Alexis Finks, and I'm the one with the IO background. So that's the easiest way to track me down.
Perfect. And one last wild question. Are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
Ooh, can I be in both?
Absolutely.
Because part of what I'm doing is really coming to peace with those things that I've done forever and really moving out of a sort of striving and proving myself season. But also, this new season requires a whole bunch of new muscles. So I would say that I am very much in both.
Thank you so much. This has been a rich conversation.
Oh, it's fun.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.